Welcome to the first episode of Opening the Present podcast and the last episode of Manly Matters podcast. So I've got a lot to talk about today, and it's just me, no guests. I just wanted to talk about what's up with the name switch and why it happened. So first off, there are a few reasons why the name switch happened, or the rebranding happened. I took some time off to focus on me, just for personal reasons and for some things going on in my life. And one of the things that kept coming to me is, what am I doing with this podcast? And I realized a few things. One, I told myself when I started this podcast that if I was ever getting burnt out, or I felt like it was more work than fun, or I wasn't enjoying it, I was going to walk away and I was done with it. And I'm not saying I got to the point where I was completely tired of the podcast or I was completely burnt out, but I was starting to feel a little bit. And part of that was because I was really struggling to come up with some new ideas. I felt like every episode was becoming similar and all of my ideas were similar. And I was just kind of regurgitating all of the same information with different guests who would bring their own spin and their own flavor, but it was all somewhat in the same vein. And that's no knock on my guests. All my guests were phenomenal. I loved every single one of them. But it was on me to not come up with more to talk about or more to do with this idea I originally had. In saying that, I also realized that the original idea for Manly Matters and what I was actually doing weren't quite married up. The whole point of Manly Matters was to talk about what manliness was in the modern world and this idea around masculinity and where we were going with that in the future and where we're at today. And in all reality, I was doing more talking about, personal growth and things of that sort. And that really wasn't the original intent of the podcast. So there was this kind of dissonance between where I was going, where I was wanting to go, and what the original idea was. So I felt I was doing a disservice to both Manly Matters and the new direction that I was heading in the podcast. And the last one, and honestly, this was probably the least important, but it still did matter, was I was getting some negative feedback on the name. I heard from more than one person that the name Manly Matters came across as somewhat aggressive, I guess, or it kind of rubbed them the wrong way. And they thought it was this chest beating session or this, man's group of just being men and things like that. And that wasn't the intent behind the podcast whatsoever. So that is kind of what sparked the idea of, hey, maybe I didn't make the right choice with this name, which kind of led me on this trail of realizing maybe I'm not doing the right thing with this podcast. So that being said, why did I land on opening the present? Well, during that time off, some of the personal reasons that I had taken off, taking this hiatus from the podcast, I was doing a lot of self-reflecting, a lot of reading, studying on how to better myself personally. And a lot of the different principles that I was finding in the methods that I was looking through kind of talked about focusing on the present moment. One of the things that I heard, or I had read rather, that stuck out to me was depression is living in the past, anxiety is living in the future, but happiness is living in the present. And that was something that I felt I wasn't doing enough, that I was more focused on what's in the future, what's behind me, how to get better, and all this kind of stuff. And I wasn't taking the right time to enjoy the present and just be in the present. That was kind of this reoccurring theme that I had through this journey, I guess, of trying to get better myself. So that word present kept coming up in my head over and over, just be in the present, just be in the present. And so honestly, the play on words of opening the present just kind of came to me one day, or I don't want to say it just came to me. I'm full transparency. I spent hours and hours and hours trying to figure out a new name for this podcast and the new direction I was heading in. And, it wasn't this grand epiphany moment. It was sitting in front of a computer, just kind of racking my brain, almost banging my head on the keyboard, trying to get an idea to come to me. And it did. When I finally realized that everything I've been focusing on has been in the present, that word came to me. I said, you know what? Present is a dual meaning. So let's talk about opening the present, right? Opening it up for not just myself, but for anyone that listens to this podcast. So that's where the name came from. So if you're wondering what the new podcast is about, That's what it's about. It's about finding a way to live our best present. Now, that's not to say that we don't focus on the future or we don't look in the past to get better, but you can't live in the future or live in the past. And I feel like that's a lot of the problem that we have is so many of us are so anxious or depressed or, all of these negative emotions that we have are because of either the past or the future. And we're not taking time to just fully live in the present and decide what choices we can make in the present to make a better future and not repeat the bad things in the past. So that's my spiel on that. And that's ultimately how I landed on this title. So with that, this new journey that I'm on is me learning how to live my best present and hopefully being a conduit for you, the listener, to learn through me and my guests. Now, once again, same thing as with Manly Matters. I'm not an expert, but I do love to learn. So me not being the expert, I'm going to rely on fantastic guests, as I've had before, to come on and teach me how to live better in the present or how to improve my present to improve the future. Now, I might do solo episodes and talk about things I've learned or talk about, a journey that I'm on specifically. But for the most part, I want it to be in the same fashion as Manly Matters, where I bring on these people who know a lot more about things than I do to teach me and also you, the listener. So I've been hashing out all kinds of topics and guests. And one of the things I do want to tell you is, like I said before, I was struggling to come up with ideas for Manly Matters. I would sit there and, with my pen and paper, I'm old fashioned, and try to write down these ideas and I would have some. And I think those reflected in the episodes, but I felt like I was forcing them. I felt like it was becoming more and more difficult for me to land on these home run ideas. Well, to put it into perspective, I sat down last night and I said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and start, hashing through some of these ideas that I have and through some of these guests that I want to potentially have on. Some of them I've already reached out to. And in the matter of, 20 minutes, I had pushed 60 plus topics out and they were all laid out. And I was kind of amazed at how easily they were just coming to me and how many things I know I wanted to talk about and wanted to reach out to people and pass that information along to you guys. So that in and of itself told me that I was validated in making this change, that it was a good idea and that this new journey is going to be even better than the last. I want to say that, like I said before, I wasn't completely burnt out, but I was getting there. Now I am completely rejuvenated. I'm excited. I am super happy to start this new journey. It's something that I've been wanting to do for a while, and I even wanted to do it for a few of the past episodes before Manly Matters, but I felt like I needed to keep pushing and keep grinding. But, it was time to make the switch, and I'm happy we are making this switch. The topics I want to cover, they're going to cover the spectrum. They're going to be from the physical realm to the mental realm to the philosophical realm to, whatever can help us live better in the present. One other thing I wanted to mention too is with this, I want to do more to start a community. I want this to be more of a joint effort because while I can come up with all these ideas and all these topics and things like that, I don't know that it's what you, the listener, wants to hear. I don't know what you would like to hear. So I'm working on ways to get more of a community going, and it's going to take some time. I'm still working out some of the details, but I really want us to go on this journey together. I don't want it to be just me, and I don't want you to just sit there and listen to this podcast and feel like, man, I really wish this would be something he would cover, or, this person he would reach out to, or, et cetera. I want this to be a joint effort. So hopefully you're along with me on this ride. And hopefully you have some ideas that you can pass along to me because, like I said, hashing through the details, but I'm going to get a way that we can talk, that we can communicate, and I can find ways to get your ideas on the air as well. I hope this change doesn't turn you off. If you were Manly Matters diehard, I hope that you can appreciate this change as well and that you're along for this change with me as well. And for any new listeners, I'm leaving the old Manly Matters episodes up because I feel like they're all invaluable as well. They were some fantastic guests that came on and had conversations with me. And I honestly hope to reach back out to most of them and have them back on to talk about more ideas with this different flavor of podcast, because I know they have more to offer than even we got the chance to talk about in the hour that we talked about. But once again, thank you for listening. I look forward to doing this new podcast, or we'll say rebranded podcast, and can't wait to hear from you guys. Until next time, adios.